ReleaseWire helps businesses connect with interested journalists and bloggers. Check out the link in the description to save 25% on your first press release.
Admiral, radar shows that we have liberals approaching at 3 o'clock, and libertarians at 9 o'clock, and conservatives at 6 o'clock. They're coming from every angle, every viewpoint. Oh, it's Political Radar with your hosts, Rhonda and Elliot.
Hey, all you political junkies, welcome to Political Radar, the best 30 minutes of unscripted and uncensored political talk you will hear all day. We are here on a Sunday morning. Hello. Hello. And Phil Anderson is with us. Phil, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Phil, what are you doing here?
I am trying to get elected to the United States Senate by talking to you, and through you, talk to all your wonderful listeners.
Awesome. Thanks for coming
Tens
on.
and tens.
Tens and tens, dozens.
And growing. We're getting big. So we have you here. I think it's important. There's a race coming up very soon. There was a debate a few nights ago between Russ Feingold and Ron Johnson, and you were not in that debate.
That is correct.
Why is that?
I was excluded. The criteria that the Wisconsin Broadcasters
Was there drug testing? Is that why?
Well, no. I'd have passed. At least I would have arranged to pass on the days that they tested. But no, the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association has criteria, and that the two that they have are polling at 10%, which I wouldn't have met, although I would have been close, and that you had raised $250,000 for your campaign, which I think is absolutely a ridiculous standard.
Totally corrupt.
And
you would agree with that, would you not?
I absolutely agree with that.
Clearly, they represent, by definition, the Wisconsin broadcasters who, in this political season, make a ton of money from political campaigns.
Where do these guidelines come from? Who decides that that's actually like a contingency to be in the debate? Who's that?
The board of directors of the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association.
And who are these people?
Well,
obviously elected politicians.
No, they're broadcasting
for real.
For real, believe it or not.
Okay, but lucky for you, right?
Yeah.
You have us.
Yes.
And what we're going to do for you is we're going to actually ask some of these same questions, as many as we can get to you in the next half hour or so that were asked.
I have all of them, so I'd like to get through all of them.
That's fantastic. I for quite a few of them, I'll have shorter answers than my opponents do because they have to spin things and give answers that please both the people and their political contributors, and I can just tell you the truth. So
my questions are very brief. Do you support your party's candidate for president?
Yes.
Do you believe that the other two candidates are qualified or disqualified for office?
I think it depends on what you mean by qualified.
Well, I mean, are they unqualified or disqualified?
They're unfit, certainly. Maybe unqualified because people have different definitions of qualified, but I think they're both clearly unfit.
And do you feel that your opponents are qualified or disqualified?
I think that they should be disqualified because anybody who would submit themselves to a party that has those two people at the top of the ticket definitely puts party before principle. And that's a huge disservice to the voters if that's what you do, and that's what we have in our American political system. So neither one of them are qualified on principle anyway.
So what is your platform? What do you stand for? What do you want to see happen or not happen?
We have lots of questions.
Yeah, but I want to ask that because obviously that's an issue for you. Obviously, the way that things are happening in regards to not being able to debate, not necessarily having the voice that they have. So we talked about the reasons for what's happening there, but what is it that you stand for? Because you obviously have, aside from the fact that you're upset with that, what is it?
Well, I want to have the political process be more open, honest, and transparent. So one of the things that I will fight for, that I will introduce into the United States Senate if elected, are actually two bills that were introduced in the House this last session by Downsized DC, and that is the Read the Bills Act and the One Subject at a Time Act, which seem to be obvious things that our representatives should be doing, but in fact they don't, as we know. The Read the Bills Act would require that people read the bills and that be posted online before they're voted on, and that's not happening right now. And that if you just watch Congress, you can see that they're not doing that. And the One Subject at a Time Act would require that each bill be named appropriately based on its content, and that they be taken separate votes, and that every vote be recorded.
How would you enforce that, making sure that people are reading the bills?
I'm not sure about how the enforcement works. They probably have to sign something declaring that they'd read it, but the time period required for public comment or public view of those things is essential as well, because then the public gets a chance to read them, or special interest groups or unions or whoever's going to be affected by the bill, and then they can inform their representative how they feel about it, in sort of a real-time-ish environment, as opposed to, we find out later what's in bills and we don't know what they're voting on, and oftentimes they're not even on the record for how they voted on certain things.
And do you think that would eliminate some of the 3 a.m. votes that we're seeing on occasion?
It'll go a long way to making and even, this is not even really a libertarian thing. This is just a good government thing. Mm-hmm. It would, for Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Socialists, whoever, if you know what your representative is voting on and you have a chance to weigh in on that and get some direct accountability as to how they voted on separate issues, not just a big omnibus bill was that passed right before Christmas last year, which did all kinds of different things. It funded the government, added debt, continued NSA spying, funded Planned Parenthood, all kinds of different things that any individual politician voting on that, how do you hold them accountable for that? But yet, the telling thing is that it has not been introduced in the Senate and had only a little bit of support in the House. So clearly, politicians are not really interested in having that much disclosure about their votes and what they're passing.
You're all about transparency, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about gun rights.
Let's talk about
with transparency.
People have the right to own guns to defend themselves.
Do you believe? Sure. Do you believe that?
Well, the question that was asked to the other two guys was
background checks. A background checks really does relate to transparency, right?
If somebody has committed a crime with a gun, they shouldn't be allowed to have a gun. They've given up their right, but that right still exists. It's not something that can be voted away.
So you believe if you're a criminal, you should have a gun?
I didn't. I just said no.
You can be voted away, though. It can't be voted away.
No, not the public can't decide, or the Congress shouldn't be able to decide. We're going to restrict people's gun rights in general. But if somebody has done something with a gun, that they can forfeit their right to own one.
Okay. Are there any other considerations that you would think of that would make that you should not have a gun? Mental illness?
Well, yeah, I agree with mental illness. The problem I have with that, and I don't really have the answer to that, is that mental illness can be defined in different ways that could infringe on somebody's actual rights. So I'm not a psychologist nor an expert on that, but
but you're a libertarian, which could be considered mental illness.
Well, exactly. Or a Christian, or a socialist, or a homosexual, or a Muslim, or whatever. All those things to be characterized.
So the way things are right now, it's fine. We should just leave it as it is. There's nothing we should do to improve upon what's happening with background checks or anything you can think of that we could do to improve that situation. Because there is a situation. Would you not agree?
I would agree, but I don't think it's about guns.
Okay. So what do you think it's about?
I think it's about people being divided by identity politics and a lot of hate that gets peddled by the two-party system that puts people against each other. And then there's a glorification of the violence and how we talk about all these things happening. Now, not to say that everything that's happened is not tragic, but in the grand scheme of things, there's still not that many gun deaths in the United States. And a lot of the violence that takes place is, I think it's overglorified by the press.
How many would be a lot for you? You said there's not that many. How many would be a lot for you? How many would it take to actually want to do something different?
I don't know what that number is, because as long as people are, the problem is that a lot of times criminals have guns. People that shouldn't have guns get them illegally, that already have a record of violence and that would be excluded in the legal process. But if you have a situation where you're trying to legislate before the fact, and you're infringing on people's rights. And so I wouldn't do anything. They need to prosecute and more law enforcement on gun crimes, et cetera. But in terms of legislating away people's rights to own gun or making it more difficult, that's a right that belongs to people.
So we just need to be nicer to each other.
Well,
maybe we actually could take a little bit of we could smoke some weed. That would help.
Yeah, maybe.
Where do you stand on that?
Maybe I think marijuana should be fully legalized for recreation and medical purposes. And again, this is a telling issue, because for me, it's not. I have a long time ago, son, smoked marijuana, but that's not
your son's in the studio.
He's
we
right
should
over there. Sorry,
make that very clear.
I'm not calling you son.
Yeah,
no, my son's here with us.
I would prefer if you did call me son. I've been called old white man lately, and I would appreciate being called son.
All right, you got it. But it's not really a question of marijuana itself. It's indicative of how things get mischaracterized in order to infringe on our freedom on behalf of corporate sponsors. Now, Big Pharmaceutical gives a ton of money to Republicans and Democrats for that very purpose. And that's why, even though in Wisconsin, in the Marquette poll, you saw that 59% of people favor the legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes, let alone medical purposes, there's not a lot of politicians getting on board with that to the point where the law can be changed.
So that was not asked in the debate. Where do you feel like the other two candidates stand on that?
Well, I know that Ron Johnson's against it.
Okay.
And Russ Feingold has been relatively neutral. I communicate a lot with the Wisconsin normal folks and the Madison normal folks, and they're pretty upset with Russ right now because he hasn't come out. He's been friendly to that issue before.
What is normal, folks? What do you mean when you say that?
Normal is the acronym, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Okay.
And
where you get your magazine.
Oh, right.
very active, hardworking organization, and he has not come out and said that it should be legal, not even for medical purposes, which is indicative of, I think, that there's a lot of money behind that. And even though there's votes to be had, it would seem by having that position, there's enough money going into both Democrat and Republican parties.
So how much money have you gotten from pharmaceutical companies and the NRA?
It's funny.
Just round it off into numbers of thousands of dollars.
I spoke at the Marijuana Harvest Fest a couple weeks ago in Madison, and
that sounds interesting.
It was actually a very, very good thing. People didn't really light up until right before the march, and it was a 2-day event. So it really was about the activism and not about the let's all get together and the police probably won't mess with us today. But when I spoke, there was some guy out in the audience somewhere yelling, "Bullshit, bullshit, Koch brothers," and I'm like, "Come on now, that's a ridiculous accusation."
Was he smoking when he was saying that?
I don't know. He was kind of angry, so I'd say probably not, or at least not enough at that point.
He should be.
But none. Like, the answer to your question is none.
Okay.
No money from those sort of special interests because libertarians are a bad investment.
Okay, let's go to. Let's see. Where do we want to go to? Okay. Let's talk about the Affordable Care Act. How are you feeling about that? What do you think needs to be improved? What's your stance on what's there right now?
I think it needs to be completely scrapped, and it was basically a handout to insurance companies when it was first passed. And we know that they didn't read it before they passed it. We know that.
What do you mean it's a handout? Can you explain that?
That it ensures, I guess, for lack of a better word, that government money and the people that are paying insurance money go through insurance companies, and that you use the insurance companies. It does not allow for any sort of free market solutions. And by requiring people to have insurance, it means that insurance companies are making money. And it didn't do anything about the one thing that would be really, really helpful in terms of health insurance right away is to remove the requirement that you can't buy health insurance across state lines, which is ridiculous and would allow for more competition.
Why do you think that if this is the case, then and they're just collecting all this cash, why are they dropping out of this?
Because it's becoming bad risks, and the people that are not getting in. I mean, the whole thing was designed so that people that are healthy are paying in, required to pay in. Now, normally insurance companies work where you buy insurance and the risk is balanced out between people that are healthy or not healthy. But when you make everybody get in, then that skews the whole risk pool. And when people opt out and pay the fine or whatever instead, then it skews the risk pool, and they're not making any money.
So what should be there instead? What do you want to see there?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No. And I have an example to share with you that will describe what I think is the ideal way to approach this problem. These are springing up all over the place in the United States, but the example that I use is one in Wichita, Kansas, called Atlas MD, and it's a subscription service. So there's a couple of doctors that got together and formed this business where they have a monthly subscription fee for basic services, so exams, x-rays, things that aren't catastrophic or emergency oriented. And it costs about $50 a month for them to do that. Again, they're balancing risk because a lot of people don't use it, but it's there for them to use, kids' checkups, whatever it might be. But if insurance were involved in that process, that drives up the cost, reduces the choice, and makes it much,
So there are doctors who are on the other end of that, working there for people who subscribe to that, is what you're saying?
It's formed by doctors.
Okay. So where is the money coming? Where are they getting the money? Where's the revenue for them?
Subscriptions.
Okay. But for $50, what did you say?
If you
really
cut out
cheap.
insurance companies and legislation.
I heard what he said, but I just want you to explain why would that be in their best interest?
Because they're still making a living, but they're removing this huge cost that they don't make money from insurance. The customers are paying for insurance, their clients, but they're removing that whole thing out of the equation.
Right.
Let me give you an example.
But who actually is going to be in the middle of that to negotiate through all that? Is there's got to be people that actually have to be taking.
Do you have a middleman when you get your Netflix? You order Netflix and then you subscribe.
So you're relying on the internet to manage all of that.
No, they have an office. So you can just walk in there and pay your. You can
just like any other business.
Yeah, if you if you want to get a cell phone from one of the local cell phone places, and you go in there and you look at the phones and you decide which ones you want, and you can pay cash directly to them if you want.
And so if something happens, and there's some sort of issue,
that's the place for actual insurance, not the insurance.
Well, if it's just a question, that you call and ask, and you talk to the doctor or the nurse, and if they need to refer you to somewhere, then they do. It doesn't get rid of insurance.
Okay,
totally.
and you're laughing at me, but that's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, it doesn't get rid of the insurance, but it takes.
But we don't have insurance. When you get car insurance, that covers you for catastrophic things only. It doesn't cover you for oil changes and gas stations.
So we would still need insurance, though, is the point.
Yes, but it would be a lot less expensive because it's only catastrophic, and then you're managing risk better. Right now, the Affordable Care Act imposes costs on people and systems for routine care, making it slower, less choice, more expensive.
Sure, but routine care is actually how you find out that you do have a catastrophic situation. Could you not?
No, I'm not saying people shouldn't have routine care. I'm saying that insurance doesn't need to be involved in that. All they do is make it more expensive. And that's why I.
But a routine care, a test that was going to tell me if I have cancer is sometimes $1,200. I need insurance for that. I need some coverage for that.
I can't speak to what any individual test costs, but it's probably $1,200. But how much of that is insurance? And another question I think that demonstrates this is if you go to a hospital, and we've done this in our family, we go and get care for get something and negotiate what the cost will be to us if we're not insured for this. First of all, you don't know what your healthcare even costs because they're billing insurance directly. So they bill not whatever they want, but they can bill whatever the insurance will bear. And then, of course, if that's going to the federal government, there's no accountability on the federal government's end in terms of what's being spent. But if you go and say, okay, I'm paying for this myself. What are you going to charge me for this service or that this operation or whatever? The prices come way down. And they you have a marketplace then where things get negotiated and you can choose which care you want. Right now that doesn't happen.
So you're just really and truly interested in getting rid of the insurance, like the large amount of insurance deals that are happening out there. That's what you
I think the insurance lobby has a huge influence in.
But the insurance lobby, and I mean, the insurance companies have a lot. There's a lot of jobs there as well. There's jobs. Wouldn't it be fair to say that maybe insurance doesn't need to make?
Well, I don't want to have a political position that props up an industry because they're very good at influencing politicians in Washington. If there's a lot of jobs in the insurance industry because they're spending lobbying money on getting the Affordable Care Act passed, then they should find. I mean, if those jobs are lost because the ACA is lost, they'll find other jobs.
Maybe the issue is actually Citizens United. Maybe the reason that we need to deal with this is the money that's going to the politicians.
I would agree with you. And are you going to ask me about Citizens United? Because I'd love to answer that question.
Well, it comes to mind because I think about, I think insurance would be great, and it was at one time. But the problem is, the costs are going up because people are allowing, it's a private business, right?
Yes.
So there's the issue. There's another issue with the fact that these people get to give all this money to politicians as well.
Well, it's a regulated private business.
To some degree.
Highly regulated.
Highly regulated to the point that...
The cap, though, for what people... I mean, look at these buildings they're building, right?
Yeah. They actually have to do that. And
why do they have to do that?
Because they have to have liquid assets. They have to have assets to cover if there's catastrophes. So if there's
a building?
They need to have liquid assets. And is a building a good liquid
asset? Have you seen Acuity lately?
Hey, I said the same thing. I think it's insane. They have a roller coaster or something in there.
They have a Ferris wheel.
Whatever. Ridiculous.
A Ferris wheel inside an insurance building?
Yeah, if that isn't an example of the problem we have. But so on Obamacare, there are a couple things that people like about it. One is the pre-existing condition clause, and the other is the fact that 26-year-old adults can be on their parents' insurance. How do you feel about those things?
Well, I think if we're free to choose insurance companies and buy insurance over state lines, then the market will respond to that like it always does, and there will be insurance plans that cover pre-existing conditions, and there will be insurance plans where you can scale up how old you want your children to be. How old they are when they're on there.
How do you know there will be, though, if it's not something that's regulated through the government and decided on? How will you know that it will? Because I have a pre-existing condition, and I was only allowed to get health care because of Obamacare.
Well, let me first preface this by saying I'm not completely against the social safety net. I mean, that's something I think that needs to exist and that we all consent that should exist. It's not an explicitly libertarian position, but I agree that that's a good thing for us to do. But to answer your first question, let's refer to the conversation we were having before the before our show started here, and that was about cell phones. That's a relatively it's regulated in terms of frequencies you can use and things like that. But because there's a wide open market for that, then we've got more computing power in our pockets than the space shuttle had in the 80s. And it responds to that. People want something, and somebody will make something that does that. So if it's true, and I believe it is in a lot of cases, that people want their kids as they get to 26 and beyond maybe to still be on their insurance, that there'll be products that do that and mitigate the risk between the family, or that cover pre-existing conditions or have ways to do that. I believe that if when you observe industries that are less regulated, they respond to what people want, because in order to exist, they have to sell stuff to people. So
that is one place that I actually disagree with you on. I actually think out of the 20,000 pages of Obamacare, the pre-existing condition clause could stay. So we could keep a couple sentences out of the 20,000 pages. And I think that would be appropriate, because that does help create a flat playing field, and it helps people make very clear decisions, because they don't have to be concerned about, well, do they consider this a pre-existing condition or not? It's just like going to McDonald's. I buy a Big Mac or I don't. They buy insurance or they don't. And I think that helps level the playing field a little bit.
So moving on to national security and ISIS, what are your thoughts there?
Well, there's two parts to it. And again, like most libertarians who try to answer political questions, we've got a set of ideals that we work to, but we're a long way from that in the current reality. So we're going to talk about what the ideal situation would be, and then what we need to do in the short term. Ideally, starting 100 years ago after World War I, we would not have participated in transferring the authority over the Middle East from the Ottoman Turks to the British and the French, and totally destroying the sovereignty of the people that live there, which resulted in the State of Israel being created after World War II, which was created a huge problem. And then it toppled the Shah of Iran and all the things that we've been doing over there, resulting in now a situation where we're, bombing hospitals that are run by nonprofits and drone striking weddings and all the things that are going on. That's a travesty. Now, that all being said, we have commitments there. We have a group of people there that want to kill us and that are at war against us, or at least declared war against us. So I think that we need to withdraw in a longer term from the Middle East as much as possible, and from all of our military bases and engagements and involvements across the globe. In the short term, we still need to defend ourselves, and that's a legitimate function of government. And
would you send troops to Syria?
No.
Why not?
Because that would just make things worse. We should try to pull back from Syria.
Have you seen the video that people are? I mean, it's out there on social media.
You think troops will make that better?
I'm just wondering what you think we should do about that.
I think we should pull back, honor the current commitments that we have. But we have made that mess. We made that mess. Primarily the United States of America. Now Russians are involved, and
so the Russians are completely excluded from what's happening there right now. We made that mess.
Yes.
Not the Russians.
But we won't make it any better by sending troops.
So you're fine with what the Russians are doing right now?
I'm not fine with it, but I don't think it's necessarily our business. So
you don't think we should step in at all and try to deal with what's happening?
Well, in the process of withdrawal, we defend the people that are there now and the involvements that we have, and that's sort of the balance. And I won't say that I'm a military expert, but we need to defend the assets that we have now and try to help the people that we can now. But what
should we do domestically with ISIS?
Domestically?
I mean, because I know that's a lot of Republicans, to protect us and, at our home.
I will never, ever trade security for privacy. I'd never do that. I'm very much against the NSA spying, and I'm for the Fourth Amendment. So people need, the government, any agency of the government should have a lawful search warrant before they invade somebody's privacy, whether that's their home or their internet dealings or whatever. And that's just the price we pay, and it stinks. But some of the things that they're talking about protecting us against are things that, again, were caused by our meddling overseas. We've radicalized tens of thousands of people to hate us. And they don't hate us for our freedom. That statement on its face is absolutely ridiculous. They hate us because we bomb them and kill innocent people, and we've been involved in their business for, just 100 years, from my example. I mean, our government is immoral and has conducted an immoral, impractical, aggressive foreign policy for a long, long time, since Teddy Roosevelt, pretty much, in South America. And we're paying the price for that by people hating us and wanting to attack us here and infiltrate our society or whatever. So the first thing we need to do is stop overseas interventions and be the nation that we think we are and that we want to be, a nation of freedom and individuals and respect and sovereignty and all those things, and then address locally, but only by our own rules, our own constitutional rules, how we apprehend people at
Okay,
home.
do you think Ron Johnson has been strong on terrorism?
Wow. That's a difficult
That was
question.
a really long pause.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I can't. It's not a yes or no question.
Well,
his advocacy of military policy has increased terrorism. He's trying to fight terrorism
That's
with
a
more
good
military
answer.
action.
I'll take that answer.
But it's like a yes and no. He's helped create the problem a lot more, but also trying to defend it. So it's two sides of the same coin. Our foreign policy means that, and both Democrats and Republicans, have not talked about not going to war anymore. And Hillary Clinton's a perfect example of that. And Russ Feingold backs her. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. Let's regime change in Libya.
When
all these things.
Feingold was asked about that during the debate, he said cutting the funding and trying to bolster better intelligence. That's what he would like to see happen.
What does he mean by better intelligence? Now, I sort of read or saw a commercial of his. I think the title of it is Tough or something, where he said we need to send special forces to the Middle East and we need to increase the resources for protecting us at home. And I would ask the question, I doubt that he was asked it because people love the fact that he voted against the Patriot Act, but that's what the Patriot Act was about, increasing resources for law enforcement at home. If the Patriot Act were to come up again, would he be at odds with his own commercial or would he vote against it again? And I think that had that vote in the Senate for the Patriot Act, the first vote, because he did vote to reauthorize it later, but the first vote, the one that people hang their hat on, if that were 49-50, if it was a close vote and his party had said, we really need this to pass, would he have been free to vote no on the Patriot Act? I argue no. And we will never know.
And we won't know, and there's no way to even,
But you see often,
that.
but even lots of bills go through Congress where they're labeled must pass, meaning that both parties want them to pass. And then it's expected of every single Republican and Democrat to vote yes, and occasionally they dissent and vote differently than their party says, but then they're at risk of being primaried or not being funded or not getting committee chairmanships. That's just how it works, and it's not a secret.
So you're not really. So you think the fact that he went to some degree rogue against his party and did that's not a good thing?
No, I think I believe that he meant that vote, that he believes that way, but I don't think that he's free to make a decisive vote on something had that been close. I don't think he's free because he's a Democrat, because he gets funding from the Democrat Party and because he's their candidate here. I don't think he's free to make a different vote.
At this point, in this time.
Yes. And that's
actually, all speculation, right?
Well, I agree. I'm just telling you how I feel. I have no evidence of it.
Right.
But I think that commercial was indicative of the fact that the Democrat Party gets money from, defense contractors and people that are, internet companies and people that are interested in all these things that we're talking about. And that, his instructions or his mission is, as a good Democrat, is to not walk on their toes by stirring up trouble for them among his constituents.
So really, everything you keep saying just keeps circling back to the fact that we need to get money out of politics, right? I mean, we just need to.
Agreed.
Would you pardon Snowden?
Yes.
Okay. I
Was
mean,
that-
I know
was
you're
that a
I know
question?
you're not a president, but
I throw him
would
a
you
party.
be in favor of
I
that?
throw him a party. I think he's a hero. He risked his life and everything he has for the purpose of bringing that information to us.
And we have approximately, according to Wikipedia, which maybe that's wrong, but 800 foreign military bases. How many would you increase that by?
Increase that by.
All of the other candidates say they want to hold or increase military spending.
I know.
All of them.
That's ridiculous.
Every single.
And let's look at what military spending is for. The hidden cost of military spending is contracting and, in essence, war profiteering. So let me give you one example, and I know this to be 100% true. An associate company of Halliburton has the contract for doing the laundry for soldiers that are in Iraq and Afghanistan. The soldiers that are in Iraq pay $5 to have this company that I won't name do their laundry. That company charges $99 per load of laundry to the federal government because they got a no-bid cost-plus contract, meaning that they were just given the contract because they're politically connected and making donations, and that they can charge the government whatever their cost is without it being examined, and then build in a profit of, I think, 3%. That's the same way with it's laundry, trucks, missiles, missile repair, things that are done by private contractors. There's a ton of money that flows through our military-industrial complex that's not about how much troops are getting paid, how many troops are anywhere, or how many installations we have, or whatever. It's a handout. Again, it's a handout like Obamacare is for insurance. It's just a way that we're told to believe about something, that a problem is identified and exaggerated, and then in the background of that, there's money flowing from our pockets in the form of taxes through the government to people that prop up those two big major parties.
Money fixes everything. So our country spends 10 times more than the next nearest country, which is Russia, which they themselves spend more than anybody else, right? So how much more should we increase that by? Because the other parties keep saying we need to increase.
We need to decrease it radically.
So, okay, so you say that. How do you make people that are terrified and obviously are turned on by, yes, we need to increase our safety and our military spending? How do you not sound like a crazy man?
Well, I think we have to talk about the things that I'm talking about right now, and not, if we say we're going to cut defense spending, and that's the totality of the comment or the position, then people will get scared, and I think they should be nervous. We've created an environment where it's dangerous in certain ways, and now we're trying to solve it with more military, and that obviously that doesn't work. So we need to talk about things like war profiteering and the things that are going on, and places where we have bases where we're not in danger, and have been, for Western Europe, for example, where things have been relatively calm since the end of World War II, yet we still have huge military bases there and lots of troops there, and we're basically funding the defense of Western European countries who spend a tiny amount of their economy on their own defense.
And the rest on healthcare.
And the rest, yeah, exactly. Gary Johnson makes an excellent point, and Ron Paul said the same thing, that by defending them, we're actually funding their social welfare systems because they have money for it. So, I mean,
Gary Johnson and his Aleppo moment. Come on, what was that?
I'll tell you what. I love Gary Johnson, and I know him. That was just a brain fart, really. He's not an expert on foreign policy. I'm not saying that, but he knows he has a position on Syria and on Aleppo, and it's been well documented. And he was laid that out to the editorial board of the Chicago Tribune and Detroit News, and the people that are really interested in finding out the whole story, that he what he believes in and his plans tend to agree.
If he's not an expert on foreign policy and you want him to be your president.
Well, I don't think the president's supposed to be an expert in the sense that I'm talking about. They need to know what they're doing, but that's no president should be put up there as on a pedestal as being an expert at anything. Because they're just one person. There's got to be a legislative process. It would be nice if they would be
actually a little bit more in touch with it, though.
Well, I think you're making an assumption that doesn't hold, and that is by his answering that question that he's not qualified on foreign policy, and I would disagree with that assumption.
Okay, can we get to something else, because we don't have much time left, and we have a few more questions that were asked during the debate. Which
so we'll do like rapid fire. I can give you yes or no's. I love that stuff. Sure,
that's good. So take a rapid fire.
Okay, Black Lives Matter. What can we do? There's an issue. What's going on? How do you see that?
We need to stop identity politics, respect the fact that they're angry, but not necessarily let them get away with doing things that are against the law.
Okay, Social Security.
It needs to be, in the short term, the retirement age should go up. People should be able to opt out. In the long term, it should go away because the government does a bad job of managing it.
It should go up, like how much and when and how?
Well, I thought this was a short answer.
I know.
Gradually, retirement age going up over the next few years, like relatively quickly.
So Ron Johnson says that we can solve it through economic growth. What's that?
Well,
how does that work?
That sounds like more taxes to me, and I'm not in favor of more taxes.
Okay. Renewable energy.
I think the market should decide, and people do decide that every day. When I get my MG&E bill, I can choose to get some of my power from wind. I might pay a little bit more for that, and I do. But that's how it should work.
How are you on fracking? What do you feel about that?
If people frack on their own property, they should be allowed to do so. And I think it's a lot safer than people are being told.
Okay. We talked about defense. What about veteran care?
Yeah, oh my goodness. I come from a long line of people that have served in the military. I served in the military for 3 years, and we need to keep our promises. And the fact that the VA is such a mess and is doing such a bad job, and getting people hooked on opiates who then have to go out to the black market when the prescriptions run out and use illegal forms of drugs, which shouldn't be illegal in the long run, but they should have access to marijuana to help solve those things. That's a huge.
How do you differ on Ron Johnson on veteran care?
Well, I guess I would differ on him. I'd want to make it more of a free market solution, so that might agree with him. But I also think that we should stop creating as many people that need veteran care by having a militaristic foreign policy, and that we regularly disrespect and waste the sacrifice that people offer when they join the military.
Well, he said that he wants them to be able to choose private care.
I think they should. I mean, it's giving them a way to choose. And VA
is he gonna? I mean, he assumes we can. He loves choice. Right? He talks about that all the time. He doesn't really care if you can pay for it or not, but he wants you to have that choice, but he's not concerned if you can pay for it.
I think in the long term, we need to do everything we need to do, everything that we can for veterans.
Yes.
That's the deal.
We're paying for that. We should be paying for that.
Exactly. And if whatever that means, and getting them better care, because any institutionalized VA medicine, and I participated in that as a veteran, It's not the best, and you
So
don't
whatever
have
it
a choice.
costs, you would pay for.
Yeah, and then do our best to have fewer and fewer people in the system by virtue of not going to war as much.
2 more questions. Student loan debt.
Student loan. We should not be increasing the amount of money that we're giving students to attend college. It skews the market. College tuition has skyrocketed by as fast as we've increased loans and grants, and that needs to go away. And right now there are a lot of college graduates who are unemployed and unemployable, and so the number of administrators has gone way up in the process of funding more college. It's a bad idea for the government to fund anything. It skews the market.
But I should get paid more, right?
Oh, you should get paid as much as you deserve.
Because I teach it. You
Okay, let's talk about people that actually have families, right?
Okay.
Are you a family values guy?
What does that mean?
Exactly. So do you feel that family leave should be something you get paid for? Is this something that you have a child, you get 6 weeks off paid?
I don't think the government should mandate that.
So you don't believe in paid family leave?
I don't think in the government doing that.
Okay, 185 countries actually do. Why shouldn't we not be doing that?
Because I think if the government, we should allow the labor force to negotiate that, for people to negotiate that individually, and because if people should take seriously their ability to negotiate their labor, that would come out, and the people.
When you say people take responsibility, are they, who are these people that want to negotiate individually? Any
individual. If I'm talented in my field, and I'm comparing, or even as a professor or whatever, if I'm going to teach at UW or teach at Marquette or whatever, and I'm negotiating my benefits because I'm talented and skilled, or if I'm collectively bargaining, now that's something that I don't know if you're going to ask me about.
What if you're a cashier at a grocery store and you have a child? You can't really. There's no room for negotiation there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I don't think the government should be mandating leave.
What should happen to that person with that child?
I don't know.
Should that person have the ability to have an abortion prior to having the child?
No.
No.
I'm pro-life.
You are?
Yes.
Okay, so you want this woman, this cashier at the grocery store, to have the baby, but once she has the baby, you think she's just on her own.
I think that a baby is a human life, and and a mother shouldn't be allowed to terminate that life.
Okay, but that life, is once she has the child, that life continues. So you're saying no family leave. There's nothing she should be given to try to help her take care of that child.
I don't think the government should do it. The government is, in its nature, it's coercive.
Well, if her grandparents don't have any money to give her, who's going to help her?
Her community. There's lots of people out there that do. I actually worked as the vice president of the board for an organization called Pregnancy Helpline back in 2006 to 2008. And what that did was, and we had resources to help people in those situations so that they didn't have to choose abortion if they didn't feel forced to, which a lot of women do based on circumstances or the other people involved in the equation, and help them have resources for the baby after they have the baby. Food
So you want to see Roe versus Wade overturned and have abortion rights taken away?
I think that I believe that from the point of conception that this is a human being with rights and is a human alive individual, and that any abrogation of that is immoral and unconstitutional. Because I believe, setting aside any religious viewpoints, and this is not a religious viewpoint. This is based on the fact that an embryo is an alive human individual, creating its own atmosphere, attaching itself to the inside of the mother's uterus, defending itself from mom by creating a placenta that defends itself against the mother's antibodies. For all these reasons, it has its own plan of growth. It's an individual that there's no, if you support life, from that point all the way through death, and for people that have disabilities or people with that in any situation that you could say aren't viable or less than valuable or whatever, this is a huge issue. This isn't really just about abortion. It's about the death penalty. It's about euthanasia. It's about racism. It's about the roots of progressivism, which started in a eugenics situation back when even a professor at the University of Wisconsin, who was head of the American Economics Union, advocated for the minimum wage as a way to keep people of color from procreating. I mean, this is a huge issue. Life should be respected, and it's all tied together.
I think life, though, is the problem, the word in itself. And again, once this baby is born, this mother could be, 17, and her parents could have kicked her out of the house, and she could be living on her own. She still has to go to work to have a paycheck.
I'm not arguing that she shouldn't have help. I'm arguing that the government does a bad job of it.
So you would like to see them improve on that help?
The government?
Mm-hmm.
The government will always do a bad job of that.
Okay.
And it will always be coercive and always be corrupt.
Well, I know that if she receives a check and she can buy formula and she can continue to stay in her home and not be homeless, I don't think she's going to say they're doing a very bad job on that.
Well, maybe not, but she's the recipient of it but the rest of us are the ones that
She's not the recipient, though. It's the child that you wanted her to have that's the recipient.
I didn't want her to have the child. The child existed. Thence comes the problem, the issue, the problem, the challenge.
So
I didn't want her to. I'm not involved in the conception.
Yeah. So are you completely for birth control? Would you like to see birth control passed around a little bit, more access to it?
I have no problem with that.
So you believe everyone should have better access to birth control? As long
as I don't have a problem with that. People can choose that or not choose it. That's not a life issue. I don't think the government should be doing that. But whatever people choose in terms of birth control, I have no problem with.
Okay, if this woman can't afford birth control, would you like to see the government help her, assist her in getting that birth control?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's any of the government's business.
Okay. All right.
So,
I'm done on that one.
That's not a libertarian viewpoint.
Being pro-life?
Yeah.
It hasn't been historically, but there's more and more people that are pro-life that are libertarians now, and I don't have a number, but based on the opinions of the people that are pretty prominent in our movement, there's a lot more people that are pro-life now and libertarian.
So you're going to make me be a Democrat? Because that's the whole Republican thing, all the religion and the fact that this has been the law, the American law for 40 years. It's pro-freedom.
It all comes down to this, and there can be differing opinions about this, and not necessarily about religious based opinions. At whatever point this thing becomes a human being, at whatever point we decide that is, and not religiously, physiologically, logically, medically, whatever way you arrive at that point, that person, as we're defining it, has the right to exist. And nobody should have the right to take away that right from somebody else.
Okay. You're a libertarian, so this should make sense to you. What do you do? You're gonna put the doctors in jail? You're gonna put the underage girls in jail? How in reality, since government does a terrible job of enforcing things, what do you want to have happen?
I don't have the answer to that, to be honest with you. I think that
so your personal viewpoint is you personally don't like abortion, but you don't really want it to be policy.
No, I want it to be illegal. At whatever point we decide, without setting religion aside, at whatever point we decide as a society, based on the medical evidence, that this is a human being that deserves protection, that's the point. And although my personal viewpoint is from conception, I'm willing to set it again. But I'm setting that aside. If we decide medically, the American Medical Association has an opinion, whatever it may be, we arrive as a society at a solution to this. And maybe it's at heartbeat, maybe it's at the baby starts to move for the first time, whatever that is, that at that point, that's when the decision-making stops for anybody else other than this child's right to live.
And that abortion doesn't stop even if it's illegal. It still happens. That women still are out there. Girls are still out there doing this to themselves. Mm-hmm. So the beautiful thing about the fact that it was legal and safe is that we are caring for these people that have rights. Would you disagree with that? It's safe the way it's done.
Well, I don't disagree with...
Because it's still going to happen. People are still going to have sex. They're going to still get pregnant. And abortion is still going to happen.
Yeah, and if we arrive as a society at a definition of a human being at a certain point, then what's happening in an abortion? That human life is ending, right?
Well, we did. We accepted the definition is when they are, they exit. Once they're born, that's the definition.
Yeah, and I don't agree with that definition. Okay. I don't think it makes sense medically or logically, and for most people, I don't think it makes sense either. I believe that very, very few women are comfortable with an abortion at an 8 month. It's a lot more difficult at that stage.
And not very many of those happen.
Exactly.
Okay, so we got to wrap on that, unfortunately. So if people would like more information about you, your positions, what would you like them to do?
Well, go to my website, the number 4, philanderson.org, or follow me on Facebook, Anderson for U.S. Senate, facebook.com/Anderson for U.S. Senate, all small letters, no punctuation. And, follow along. We do a lot of social media, a lot of press releases. We cover a lot more issues than we had time to cover today. I really wanted to get time to talk about Citizens United and money and politics because that's an issue which I differ with a libertarian viewpoint on. And I think it's very instructive. But, that's how you follow me.
Well, if you happen to be elected, you can come back and talk to us about that.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Or not. We have actual non-politicians every once in a while.
Once in a while.
So that wraps up.
If a libertarian gets elected to the U.S. Senate, I imagine that will be relatively newsworthy.
That's true. We'll have to wait in line, you're saying.
Well, you guys had me on now, so you're at the front of the line. So
thank you. So that wraps up Political Radar, episode number 43. We had Phil Anderson on today, and you can get involved, especially if you're female or minority. I hate that word minority because you're not minor. You're just not the same color as me. I just despise that. But I want more people that are not like me, old white men. We need more people that are not.
We need
like
more
me.
diverse group of people.
Is that the way
Can
I'm
we
supposed
say
to
that?
say it?
Let's say diverse.
Okay, diverse. Everyone thinks they're diverse, though. I think I'm diverse from Phil. So if you want show notes, go to politicalradar.com/43. You can look me up on Facebook. I'm Elliot C. You can look me up on Twitter. I'm just plain old Elliot on Twitter.
At Sitnicow on Twitter and Facebook.
That's it. We're out. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Political Radar. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. To stay up to date, visit politicalradar.com or connect with us on Facebook or Twitter.